Destiny 2 has been in a complicated spot ever since the Light and Darkness saga ended, and following the lukewarm reception of Edge of Fate, many people are wary before dropping cash on yet another DLC. Renegades arrives now, promising something quite different, a deep space bounty hunter vibe with clear influences from Star Wars and that space western atmosphere that Bungie had never properly explored before. The big question is, after so many recent stumbles, does this expansion truly deliver content that justifies the investment, or is it more of the same wrapped in a new aesthetic? Today, I'm going to be straightforward about what works, what disappoints, and whether or not you should open your wallet for this DLC. I'm Matthew, and the video is about to begin. From what can be gathered just by watching trailers, isolated cutscenes, and official materials, the story of Destiny 2 Renegades seems to be precisely the moment the game decides to become more serious and personal, moving slightly away from the indestructible space superhero vibe. The plot feels like a very direct revenge story, with a foot in the space western genre, and this perfectly suits the Destiny universe when the idea is to focus more on the weight of the Guardian's choices than just the visual spectacle. The premise itself delivers this atmosphere. A massive riot at the Prison of Elders spirals out of control. Cayde 6 is killed by Uldren Sov and the Scorn Barons, and your Guardian literally sets out on a hunt to settle the score on the Tangled Shore. Viewed from the outside, without even playing, the campaign seems structured like a hit list, almost like an Old West kill list, but in space, which gives Renegades a very clear identity compared to other more generic universe savior expansions. I really like this more focused approach because it gives the feeling that, for the first time, Destiny lets you be less of a symbol and more a character driven by anger, grief, and a personal motive for being there. The choice to kill Cayde 6 is one of those script decisions that, just from the trailers and the way it was announced, makes it clear that Bungie wanted to shake things up. He wasn't just an NPC, he was practically the franchise's mascot since the first Destiny, so seeing the character fall, having a funeral in the tower, and becoming the trigger for the entire expansion gives the story a weight it rarely had before. Seeing all this from the outside, it very much gives the feeling of, okay, now it's serious. As if the game were saying that no one is completely protected by the script, not even fan favorites. Another thing that stands out even from just the summaries and scenes is how Renegades flirts with the idea of justice versus revenge. You spend the entire campaign chasing Uldren, kill all the Barons, get to him, and the game ends at that moment when your Guardian and Petra point their guns, and the screen cuts to black with the sound of the shot echoing, leaving it ambiguous who effectively pulled the trigger. I really like this choice because, even without playing, you can feel that the expansion is more interested in making you think about whether that was deserved catharsis or cold-blooded execution, especially when Zavala makes it clear he doesn't approve of this path of vengeance. Renegades also seems to be the point where the Awoken universe finally gains more personality, with a greater focus on the Reef, the Tangled Shore, and later the Dreaming City. Even just watching videos and materials explaining the campaign, you can tell that Bungie tried to expand the lore of these mysterious people, tying Uldren's death, Riven's presence, and the curse of the Dreaming City into something that goes beyond just
avenging Cayde. This gives a good feeling that the story is not just an isolated arc, but a turning point that feeds future plots, both about the Dreaming City itself and about Uldren's redemption as Crow. Seeing everything from the outside, the impression is that Renegades is the expansion where Destiny 2 finally finds an interesting middle ground between personal story and grand cosmic narrative. The hunt down the killer of your friend plot is super simple, but precisely because of that, it works as a strong emotional engine that holds the player and, at the same time, opens doors to more complex themes, such as guilt, manipulation, and the cycle of violence in the Light and Darkness universe. In the end, the lasting impression is one of an arc that feels remarkable not only for the shock of Cayde's death, but because, for the first time, the Guardian stops being just the perfect hero and starts getting involved in morally heavy decisions. And for those who enjoy the story in a loot shooter game, that's a huge step in the right direction.
Destiny 2 Renegades gives a very clear feeling of being that expansion focused on, quote, fun gunplay again, with less embellishment and more straightforward shooting. And this is apparent in practically everything that has been shown. The sci-fi vibe mixed with Star Wars inspiration, full of blasters and an underworld atmosphere, gives the impression of a much more rogue and, quote, outlaw Destiny, which fits perfectly with the drifter driving the story. From what can be seen in the previews, the core of the gameplay seems to be the so-called lawless frontier, which is essentially a, quote, playground with missions highly focused on combat, without so much hassle of walking from one point to another. The three main activities, target hunts, smuggling missions, and sabotage, seem to take what Destiny does best, fighting hordes, dealing with elites and mini-bosses, and simply throw it in your face all the time, almost as if they were mixing Gambit, Patrol, and Strikes into one package, but with a much more aggressive pace. What caught my attention the most are the Renegade abilities, these new skills that practically function as a, quote, mini-super, occupying the grenade and melee slots. The idea of gaining a more exaggerated skill, with upgrades at various levels, significantly changes the build dynamic. Instead of just thinking about subclass, aspect, and fragment, you will also choose which, quote, dirty trick to carry, whether it's something more defensive like a healing dome, or something offensive to melt the front line. Another thing is that the game seems to be trying to solve the eternal problem of progression and loot, offering a more direct path to reach the power cap just by playing the Renegades content. This, along with a more focused weapon pool, with blasters and dozens of new weapons scattered among activities and dungeons, can make the feeling of reward much more consistent, without so much, quote, junk filling the inventory. The part about not having an entirely new destination, but rather reworked versions of Mars, Europa, and a remixed Venus for the lawless frontier zones, might disappoint those who expected a massive, brand new map. But at the same time, it seems Bungie invested more in how you use those spaces than in pure empty area. Visually, this mix of familiar locations with a criminal outpost feel and syndicate hub gives the impression of a dirtier, more intimate Destiny, almost as if you were in a marginal corner of the solar system instead of an epic war front. Putting all this together, the combat-focused lawless frontier, renegade abilities, blasters, criminal factions, and the campaign against the Barant Imperium, the lasting feeling is one of an expansion much more centered on a, quote, space gunslinger fantasy than the traditional Savior of the Light. It feels like the kind of content where you jump in more to enjoy the shooting, farm stylish new weapons, and feel like an anti-hero making deals with syndicates than to get bogged down in
complicated systems or bureaucratic mechanics. Overall, the personal impression is that Renegades looks like a necessary refresh. Less cosmic drama, more mercenary and space fantasy with loud guns, exaggerated builds, and a more direct and rewarding daily routine. If all this fits together as well as it looks in the videos and previews, it could be the kind of expansion that doesn't revolutionize Destiny, but makes you want to log in every day just to take a few more laps on the lawless frontier.
The new game modes in Destiny 2 Renegades seem to bring a very interesting twist to the game's pace, especially with the focus on the lawless frontier, which is practically the heart of this expansion. This mode puts the player into a chaotic frontier scenario, where missions are fast, intense, and highly focused on combat against PvE enemies, but with a highly strategic PvP twist, as invaders can appear in the middle of matches. This creates a cool tension because you always have to be alert. It's no longer just shooting bots, but also thinking about other Guardians who might want to sabotage you.
The aspect of the invasions, inspired by Gambit but with its own nuances, sounds like a mechanic that can be very fun to play and very tense to face. I liked that invaders have clear and limited objectives regarding time and lives, which should make the game more dynamic and not that endless invasion that sometimes annoys. And the fact that the defender has extra incentives to kill the invader keeps everything in constant suspense, adding a lot to the sense of risk and reward. Another point that caught my attention is that all this Lawless Frontier content has matchmaking, so it's not that solitary Western place. You'll have teams, alliances with criminal factions, and a progression scheme within this environment, which can create that sense of community, but with a nervous atmosphere, like those where every player can be a potential enemy or temporary ally. This brings a vibe somewhat similar to the frantic atmosphere of Gang Wars-style arena games. As for the Renegade abilities, I see them as something that renews the gameplay without losing the game's identity. Having new offensive and defensive abilities that function almost like pocket supers used in place of grenades and melee attacks adds a new strategic layer. You won't just shine because of your weapon loadout, but also by how you master these new combat tools, which are upgradable and specific to this mode, bringing freshness to the fights without overcomplicating things. I also really liked the idea of having different maps on familiar planets, but all configured for this territorial dispute between syndicates. This creates a cool Cold War territorial scenario where the entire server seems to be competing for control of the region, and this constant rivalry promises to keep the gameplay in this area alive daily, with missions, objectives, and advantages for those who lead the factions. This should generate that infinite replayability that the community loves so much. Speaking of traditional PvP, it doesn't seem to have been neglected, but those who want to can focus on this newfangled lawless mode without losing the classic Crucible. However, given the emphasis Renegades placed, it seems Bungie wants the main focus to be this dynamic mix of PvE and PvP with invaders and disputed territories. This is great for those who like varied action and not just separate modes, creating a
new way to experience Destiny that might even attract those who aren't big Crucible fans. My personal view is that these new modes give a very welcome refresh to Destiny 2, bringing that mix of chaos, risk, and cooperation that seems to be exactly what the game needed at this point in its life. It seems that battles will become more intense and unpredictable, and the player will have more reasons to return every week with a clear goal, guaranteed fun, and a spice of challenge that doesn't let anyone get complacent. It's the kind of novelty that won't please everyone, but it can renew the passion of many people for the game.
The new weapons in Destiny 2 Renegades bring a very striking vibe that seems to highly respect what the community likes, but at the same time adds a new, almost nostalgic flavor with the Star Wars influence, especially with the blasters. These blasters work with a heat system that makes the barrel hot and needs to cool down, which brings a more strategic and intense rhythm to the shooting, because you can't just keep firing without thinking. You have to manage the weapon's pressure. For those who enjoy builds and experimentation, the variety these weapons present is absurd. There's a bit of everything: auto rifles, pulse rifles, sniper rifles, and even submachine guns and swords that come with very interesting and customizable perks that promise to create cool combos. I like that the weapons mix classic perks with new abilities, which should please both older fans and those looking for something fresh to try. One of the highlights that personally caught my attention the most was the Praxic Blade, this exotic sword that is practically a Destiny version of a lightsaber, with the ability to reflect projectiles and be thrown like a boomerang. This is something that adds a lot of charisma and an extra layer of skill that you don't see every day in an FPS. It seems perfect for those who enjoy close combat with style and a lot of personality. I also like that Renegades brings not only new weapons, but buffs for weapon types that have become somewhat overshadowed, such as shotguns and some exotics. This shows an effort to balance the meta, which is fundamental to keep the game competitive and fun, avoiding unregulated damage explosions, but also giving power to those who like different weapons. There are some weapons that come from specific expansion activities, like the Equilibrium Dungeon and the Trials of Osiris, which should excite those who like to hunt rare loot and stand out in the arena. This acts as an extra motivator for the grind, as the new weapons have perks with the potential to change the playstyle, such as shots that slow down enemies or create special visual effects that help control the battlefield. The feeling is that Bungie chose a path of quality over quantity, bringing about 40 new weapons, which is not gigantic, but should be quite varied. You can see that each one has its niche and serves specific purposes, which makes the loot chase more interesting and less generic, and also encourages the player to try different approaches in PvE and PvP. Overall, my opinion is that the Renegades weapons have a perfect balance between tradition and innovation, with the blaster's heat system and the Praxic blade giving that unique touch that renews the gameplay without losing Destiny's DNA. If these weapons achieve everything they promise, the shooting will become more technical, tactical, and especially fun, with that flavor of playing something that is new, but which you understand and feel familiar with.
Buying the Destiny 2 Renegades DLC at launch is especially worthwhile for longtime fans of the game who want an experience that refreshes what they already know without losing that essence of Destiny with intense action and striking visuals. From what has been released, the expansion promises to bring a faster pace, with game modes that dynamically blend PvE and PvP, which should appeal to those who like adrenaline and constant combat. If you enjoy this type of lawless frontier gameplay, Renegades seems to have been made for it, so it might be cool to jump in right away so as not to miss the novelty. On the other hand, for those who are a bit tired of Destiny or don't have a strong attachment to the lore and style, it might be interesting to wait a bit. From the previews, Renegades doesn't revolutionize or bring a brand new huge map. It focuses more on tweaking mechanics and getting the most out of already known locations like Mars, Europa, and Venus. So if you're not very interested in grinding, daily events, or the criminal frontier concept itself, perhaps waiting for a discount or a more complete bundle in the future makes more sense. For new players in Destiny 2, Renegades might even work as a good entry point, as the focus is on offering more direct and intense content, with facilitated progression and more guaranteed rewards. Those who are starting out may enjoy this vibe of grabbing new weapons, experimenting with renegade abilities, and playing with the activities without having to memorize gigantic maps or get stuck in complex systems right away. Even so, the base game and previous releases should be considered to understand the context. Those who are more competitive and enjoy traditional PvP may not find Renegades enough to justify an immediate purchase, because the expansion leans more towards PvE with dashes of invasion and territorial competition that are quite different from the classic Crucible. That is, if you are the type who lives for duels or ranked play, it might be worth watching reviews of the modes and balance updates before investing. But for those who enjoy a PvE VP and an extra dose of challenge and factions, Renegades can be a feast. The timing to buy also depends a little on your interest in being ahead of the community. If you like to explore all the weapons, abilities, and maps before everyone else, getting in at launch is essential. On the other hand, those who play more casually without rush and like to enjoy DLCs with all the balancing and update evolution can expect Renegades to certainly have adjustments and extra content in the following weeks. The expansion seems especially suitable for players looking for an experience with more fast action, less filler, and a focus on explosive combat, with a dash of anti-hero and space underworld. It has everything to attract Destiny fans who enjoy more technical gameplay, with new weapons and abilities to test, as well as a more criminal atmosphere that breaks
away from the traditionalism of light versus darkness. So, if this style matches yours, it will certainly be worth buying at the debut. Ultimately, I personally think Renegades is an expansion that delivers exactly what it promises, but is not for every type of player. It's worth the investment at launch for those who truly enjoy Destiny, want something new without losing familiarity, and will enjoy the atmosphere and gameplay designed to give that extra dose of adrenaline and strategy. For others, waiting a bit might be the best bet, even to see how updates will make everything more polished and balanced.
That certainly is a theory. Although I would expect to have already heard from the emissary if that was the case. I'm going to rerun the telemetry to see if I can find another radio transmission. Get us some answers.
Achieved precarious stabilization, but still request evacuation due to hostile NHI. If we can't close the singularity, we're pulling everyone in with us. Anyone